Good afternoon, everyone jumping in. We're about 1 minute away from getting started. Just to remind all the attendees that this presentation is being recorded. So if you have any friends or colleagues that you think would be interested in reviewing the information, it will be posted on our website later this week. We will have a Q&A session towards the end, and we ask that you drop your questions into the Q&A feature, not in the chat. We won't be responding in the chat. We'll be responding in the Q&A. That will give us an opportunity to respond directly and see who it is that has reached out. And if you can please hold questions till the end, as we're going to cover a lot of information, and some of your questions actually may be addressed as we go along. All right, so I think we've given just enough extra time. I know we have about 40 of you in the meeting room, and there are probably going to be more as we continue along. My name is Lena Williams. I am the Manager of Energy Account Services for Central Coast Community Energy, and I'd like to thank you for joining us. This is our commercial customer electric generation rate preview. We're essentially going to be covering some information about our upcoming rate changes and the process that was utilized to develop these rates, and of course then leave time for some questions. I do want to just kind of give some logistics, although many of us, of course, have been in the virtual meeting space for a while. Just in case you are new to Zoom, you can use your mouse to kind of hover over, and you should have a menu pop up, or you will see the Q&A feature available there. You can drop your questions down in that Q&A, and when we get to that portion of the meeting, we will cover them. And as mentioned previously, this presentation is being recorded, so should you miss any part of it, of course, you can access it via our website. We will drop that link into the chat so that you can utilize that to go back and look at the information and review it at any time. So our agenda today, so we're going to be together for about 45 minutes to an hour. I'm going to give a brief introduction of who's on the call with us and participating in our presentation. Of course, then we'll go over a little bit about our past rate design process, give it a little bit of an understanding then about how that there are pros and cons to that existing process that led to the development of this new design process and what that is going to look like. So we'll cover our rate design and that future approach, what the pros and cons are of that structure, and then spend the bulk of the time actually with some walkthroughs of what different bill comparisons will look like under the options that'll be available. I'll do a kind of general overview at the conclusion, and then we'll open things up for questions utilizing the Q&A feature that you will find in your Zoom menu. So for those of you who may be joining from our recently enrolled territories, just to cover an overview of who we are. So Central Coast Community Energy is a community choice aggregator. We're made up of over 30 communities across 5 counties. So starting originally in the Tri-County, Santa Cruz, San Benito, and Monterey, and most recently expanding last year with Morro Bay, San Luis Obispo, and this year actually enrolling over 22 communities within San Luis Obispo County and Santa Barbara County, and then closing that out next year with the city of Buellton. A CCA, or community choice aggregator, essentially means that this group of communities is actually utilizing or working with 3CE to procure the energy from clean and renewable sources that is then delivered to your home, whether that be via PG&E or Southern California Edison, they're still providing that delivery service and also then providing you with a combined bill, right, for your services. So you'll see that your participation does not really result in a lot of changes in the way that you experience the receiving of your energy or your billing under this structure. With 3CE, we started our rate design with a model that was really designed to take advantage of first looking at PG&E's existing generation rates and what they were billing for energy at that time. We would then subtract the power charge and different adjustment and any other fees that are imposed by PG&E and sanctioned by the CPUC. And then we would discount that resulting rate by the same fraction, and that was across all customer classes. So what was determined to be the percentage to be discounted in that year would be discounted the same across the board for all customers. The pros of that structure were that it definitely ensured that every customer would do better with 3CE than they would if they remained with PG&E exclusively, because we were able to take that same percentage, of course, across all customer classes, and we understood that specifically. But the cons are that it doesn't necessarily reflect the true cost to serve each particular customer base, whether that be residential, commercial, or agricultural. There are different things kind of entailed in that. And so in utilizing that kind of one size fits all, it doesn't necessarily reflect those costs. Ultimately, it was following PG&E's legacy rate structure, which was then, of course, designed to support PG&E programs. It wasn't really designed to support 3CE programs. Additionally, following that model, it required 3CE to adjust rates, and it could be as many times as 6 times a year anytime PG&E had a rate adjustment. So we were always in a reactive mode in terms of responding to any changes on the PG&E side. And if you take a look at how many times PG&E's generation rates have changed since we deployed services back in March of 2018 all the way to current, right? You're seeing that there have been several changes, and you can see the trajectory of those changes. But once again, in our previous model, that meant that we were making adjustments every time those changes happened. Now, historically, the way that our rates were structured and our customer savings was structured is that we started out in 2018 and 2019 with an annual rebate model. So we would say that in 2018, every customer would receive a 3% rebate off of their bill generation charges at the end of the year. In 2019, we increased that rebate to 5%. But we did realize, and also, receiving feedback from ratepayers, that ultimately folks don't necessarily want to wait an entire year to see their discount. And so beginning in January 2020, in addition to increasing our discount, we also changed the way we presented that discount. We actually built the discount directly into the rate instead of having a rebate model, which meant that every single month customers were receiving their discount directly on their bill. In May and June of 2020, in response to COVID-19, we actually reduced our rates by 50%. So our generation rates were cut by 50% so that folks would have a little bit more money, a little more wiggle room in their pocket as we went through the pandemic. And that was across, once again, every customer class. So residential customers, commercial customers, agricultural customers receive that same 50% reduction off of their generation rates. And then for the remainder of the year, that discount was set at 2% off of the generation rates. Ultimately, from January 2020 through the end of the year, that combined savings with that 50% discount there, what ultimately ended up being slightly more than our customers would have saved if we had just stayed at the 7% throughout the year. So overall, our customers during this period of time since deployment, they've saved over $50 million relative to PG&E for all customer classes under these models. However, our future approach is really designed to actually calculate the cost to serve customers not across the board, same, one size fits all, but across each customer class. And that includes the cost for power supply, the general and administrative expenses, energy programs costs, and then of course to maintain funds in the rate stabilization reserves for the fiscal years October 2021 through September 2024. We would be segmenting, of course, customer classes based on size and consumption profile and designing the rates based on that information. Allocate average annual costs to those various customer classes, and then adjust the cost allocation to ensure that each customer class will still save relative to remaining with PG&E. So we're designing rates to recover that cost to serve, right, from each customer class and based on that customer class's usage profiles. So the pros to this approach means that number one, we were able to significantly reduce the number of rate schedules. So there's less, right, to track in terms of how many rate schedules were out there. It reflects more accurately the cost to serve customer classes. So based on our actual service area and based on consumption patterns within those customer classes. It makes necessary adjustments, right, to ensure that we have an orderly transition from our existing model to a true reflection of cost of service. And it eliminates the numerous annual adjustments. So instead of actually having to change rates every time PG&E changes rates, we're actually able to provide predictable rates for our customers. So we've got the, in this model, accuracy, simplicity, stability, and certainty, right, and a fairness, because we're using that same criteria to determine the rates for every customer class. So in the new rate structure. And then, of course, we're also going to have, and you'll hear more about this shortly, a transitional option. So if the default cost of service rate option is not one that you want to participate in, there will be a second option for you to look at. So the cons in this structure is that while it guarantees competitive rates to every customer class, the guarantee doesn't extend to each and every customer, meaning essentially that we're not going to be able to say every customer has the exact percentage of savings. It's actually going to vary by customer class. So part of that is the reason that we're actually having our kickoff to our outreach regarding this new rate structure with a series of educational workshops like this one. So we appreciate that you're participating. We started with our net energy metering customers. So those are our solar customers last month in March, then jumped to our key accounts. This commercial segment was, the invitations were primarily sent out to our small to medium business customers, but additionally to those in the larger customer energy usage classes that were not able to participate in our earlier webinars. And then we'll have two more, so for ag and for residential. In terms of our process for getting approval on these changes finalized, it's going to begin in May with a review by the operations board. We will then, of course, take it to the Community Advisory Council, who can also have an opportunity then to review what's been designed. And then finally, our policy board will actually review and then provide that final approval in June. So the customers that, of course, are going to be affected, of course, there'll be changes across all customer classes, but the groups that we're going to speak primarily about and in our bill comparisons are existing commercial and industrial customers. So we have over 39,000 customers within our commercial and industrial customers within our PG&E service area. And we have various industries, as you can see here, and you may be coming from many different industries. And of course, these go from some really small businesses to really, really large. So at the end of the day, though, the rates that we're discussing will affect you all. So without further ado, what I'd like to do is introduce Scott Burnham of NewGen, who was involved in the rate design process for our future rate design.
Great. Thank you, Lena. Could you go maybe one slide back up? I'm sorry.
Back one.
To the time of use there. Yeah. One more. There you go. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Lena. Again, as Lena mentioned, my name is Scott Burnham. I'm a director with a consultancy called New Gen Strategies and Solutions. We've been working with 3CE on their cost of service and helping them with some rate design and getting all the analysis done. And what I want to do this afternoon is spend a little time talking about the different time of use periods that we're looking at here, some of the options that Lena mentioned before, and then talk a little bit about some of the adjustments relative to the PG&E comparison. We do comparisons to bills, obviously, as sort of part of this process. And then we'll actually walk through some example bills, and we'll talk about that. You know, as Lena mentioned, you know, we're looking at a commercial class. So there's a wide variety of different usage in this class, from very small to very large, and we'll walk through some of those examples. But on the time of use, as you know, right now what 3C follows basically what PGE lays out for their time of use, and there's a variety of reasons for this. But PG&E has actually gone and changed their time of use to make it a little more simple. Actually, what they've said is that they're going to add a springtime and change some of their summer and some of their winter periods. One of the reasons why we're seeing this change is we're really seeing a change in the California market, because there's so much solar and renewable energy coming on. We're starting to seeing changes in hourly pricing, and so PGE is changing their time of use to reflect that, and 3C is then following that. So we're seeing the addition of this spring season, which we didn't have before. The spring season will be March, April, and May. We'll see a sort of a super off-peak, low-cost period from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the spring. During the summertime, the springtime, summer, and wintertime, we'll see there will be an on-peak period, but that on-peak period that used to run from about 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. is now 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. So again, we're seeing kind of a shift there as a result of a large amount of renewable generation coming onto the market. We're adding the removal of a part peak around winter, and addition of the peak. So there's again some subtleties there, where the rates that 3C is going to offer here is going to follow that. Probably the most simple thing is that the peak hours are now every day. They used to exclude holidays and weekends, and now they're going to be every day. So from a operations point of view, it's a little more simple to follow. Next slide, please. So as Lena mentioned, we're going to have some rate options available to you as customers. The default option for the majority of the customers are going to have is a cost-based rate that's going to be applied to these new time of use periods, the time of use periods that I was just looking at. And that default option will have a series of rates, dollars per kilowatt hour charges for energy during those periods. Alternatively, we've developed a seasonal flat rate. So when we talk about some of the bill comparisons, we'll show you sort of what some of those cost differences are on an average monthly bill for an actual customer, obviously just a representative customer within the different subclasses of commercial classes. And when we talk about, we'll talk about the cost base or the default rate, and we'll talk about a seasonal flat rate. That seasonal flat rate will be available to you for a 3-year period, and then automatically switch to the default option beginning January 1, 2025. Now, the majority of customers will be sort of in that left-hand side there. There are some customers that are exempt from the mandatory transition or excluded from the sort of the default time of use changes. For those customers, 3C is offering an option as well. The default option will be based on sort of the legacy or the existing time of use periods, and we'll have rates for those. The alternative option for those customers will be a seasonal flat rate as well. But again, similar to the way that the majority of customers will have that alternative option, it'll be available for a 3-year period. At the end of that 3-year period, you'll then switch over to the default option. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about PG&E rates and their 2020. It's called the Energy Resource Recovery Account, and what it is basically a account that PG&E creates to recover fixed costs. And they estimate what those accounts are the previous period, and then in July of say 2020, they came out with these estimated of what these costs will be. They realized that for 2020 they were over collecting in the generation costs. So what this means is that they've actually come out and filed this information, and they've said that there's about a 1.2 cent over collection, and this over collection is applied to all customers, including 3C customers, right? So those that enrolled in January 2021, PG&E is over collecting with this mechanism through the PCIA charge. So what that means for our analysis is that starting when we look at bills, when we're starting in January 1, 2022, which is when these rate changes will be in effect, we realize that there's an over collection mechanism inherent in the PG&E rate. So we're basically increasing they're getting a credit right now of 1.2 cents, so we're increasing the PG&E rates by 1.2 cents. Now, in July of 2021, PG&E is going to come out with another ERRA filing, and so what we said was, well, that may impact that 1.2 cents. So when we look at these bills, we're going to show you sort of a range between the 1.2 cents sort of increase and about half that. Where that ends up, we don't really know right now. We'll know more in July when it's filed, and that'll help us sort of do a better comparison relative to the PG&E rates that'll be in effect in 2022. Next slide, please. So let's jump right in. We'll talk about, like I said, we've got 3 different examples here. We've got sort of small, medium, and large commercial customers. So this is a small commercial customer. It's about 7.2 megawatt hours annually. It's about 600 kilowatt hours in a month. So this could be a small office building. It could be a small retail, not a huge energy user. And what we've done here is we've looked at a comparison of this customer's, this is an actual customer, 3C customer. We looked at their average summer bill, we looked at their average winter bill, and then we looked at an average monthly bill. And you can see that's what those texts are on, the boxes on the left are looking at the comparison of the calculation of that bill. And again, this is just though for the generation portion, right? Because PG&E continues to serve this customer, provides the delivery services, the customer services, and the like. So those are in addition to what you're seeing here. But one of the things we want to look at, in addition to the difference between the PCIA adjustment charge, the 1.2 cents and the 6 cents, is we wanted to look at different usage patterns, because we recognize that as customers, you have that choice. You have you'll either be put on the default, or you'll put on the default, or you have the choice of opting into that seasonal flat rate. And what choice you should make really depends on what your profile looks like. So what we've shown here on the right side is a load profile. So we're saying during the weekday, this customer, basically you can say they sort of open up business at 9 o'clock in the morning. Their load jumps up right from about half a kilowatt of demand up to about 2 kilowatts of demand in the peak in hour 15, which is 3 p.m. And then at about 7 p.m. they close up shop and shut down, and the energy goes back to sort of whatever the background is. So that weekday profile is going to influence your bill for the month, obviously. And this is just one day out of 30. So if your load profile and your operations look like this example on the weekday, what we've done here on the analysis, again going back over to the left, is looking at your average monthly bill. So under the forecasted rates of PG&E, your monthly bill is about $39.71. Under 3C's current approach to rate design, which as Lena went through, is really a discount to the underlying generation charge, your bill is about $39.08. Under the proposed rates, we're talking about sort of a cost-based rate. Based on the time of use rate design, your bill would be, on average, an average monthly bill for the generation portion only, is about $34.15. If you were to select the seasonal flat rate and you had this weekday load profile, your average monthly bill would be about $34.25. So slightly higher than the time of use rate. Now, the reason for that is because if you look at this profile again, that peak time of use period is 4 to 9 p.m. So you're using a fair amount of energy before 4 p.m. during that weekday profile. You're in the off-peak rate during that time, or the standard rate, if you will. So, and again, it's going to vary by summer. It's going to vary by summer and winter, right? You can see the summer bills are slightly higher, winter bills slightly lower. But how you as a customer need to decide between the proposed time of use rate and the proposed seasonal rate is to look at your load that you're using, look at your monthly bills, and do a calculation relative to when the rates are available, and do that analysis, or contact 3CE and see if they can provide some information. There will be a rate calculator available, I believe, online to help you with this process. But again, it's really just going to kind of depend on what your load profile. So those load profiles with greater energy in sort of the off-peak and super off-peak time periods. Remember, we talked about spring having that super off-peak period during the day when there's a fair amount of renewable energy online and that on the market, and it's bringing down those costs. So you're going to benefit from the time of use rate design. But if your load is relatively flat, like we're showing on this weekend load profile, then you're going to benefit ever so slightly from the seasonal flat rate. And again, this is a small office building. Like, this is about 600 kilowatt hours in a month. So this isn't a huge amount of energy that this customer is using. But as we roll up through the different examples, you'll see that there can be a pretty dramatic difference relative to the proposed time of use rate design and the proposed seasonal flat rate design, sort of the default and then the alternative. So one last thing I want to point out on this slide here is we're showing here on the PG&E forecasted rates and the 3CE sort of current approach to rate design, the 1.2 cents being added back in. Again, we mentioned in that previous slide how the PG&E is going to come out with that adjustment, and they're crediting that back during this period, but that credit's going to go away. And so in the future, they'll be adding that 1.2 cents, or it might be 6 cents. And so in the next slide down, Lena, if you could show that, thank you. You see it's the exact same customer. All we've done is just changed that PG&E rate to forecasted by an increase of 6 cents, so about half. And again, we'll know better in July when they file their ERRA filing, and we'll have a better understanding of what that adjustment may be. But you can see for these customers, it's not that dramatic of an impact relative to the average monthly bill, because they're using a fairly small amount of energy. But as they use more and more energy, that 0.6 cents difference really does start making a big dramatic impact relative to the forecasted PG&E monthly bill. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look at a similar example, but we're looking at a medium commercial. So this customer is 1,400 megawatt hours annually. So that's about 118,000 kilowatt hours. So that's a fairly large size operation. Could be a larger office building. Kind of depends on what it may be. It could be a larger grocery store, or perhaps maybe some with refrigeration, things like that. For this example, we're going to look at, instead of sort of a weekend versus a weekday, we just picked 2 different days. And again, we looked at an actual customer load profile, and we said, day 1 example kind of looks like this. They start out at 150 kW of demand. You can tell they actually go down for some reason during the 9 to 10 hour, then they peak back up. So whatever operations they're doing, they may have shut down some motors, shut down something for an hour or so, then peak that back up. So you get a lot more spiky there in day 1. It's coming down and then trailing off. Day 2 example, you're starting out higher. You're seeing a little bit of variation there, but actually kind of coming down during the peak periods. And so understanding kind of what your load profile looks like and understanding how you use energy throughout the day is going to inform you on whether or not you're better off being in the time of use rate design, sort of the standard option, or whether or not you should look at the alternative option. So again, now we're looking at this larger customer. If we go back over to the bill, we're talking about, instead of in the tens of 20s and 30s of dollars per month, we're talking in the thousands of dollars, right? So under the day 1 load profile, if that was the representative for this month, and for the summer and winter periods, right, we're looking at an average monthly bill under PG&E of about $5,400, $436 for the generation component only. Again, similarly, the 3CE discount is that discount to that, as we talked about before. This similarly how we looked on the small commercial, we're looking at the medium commercial now. We're looking at a 1.2 cent credit back, again, or elimination of the credit, I should say, because it was a credit that was given during this period of time. In the future, that credit's going to go away. And we're estimating it's 1.2 cents here. And the next slide is we're going to estimate it at 0.6 cents. But you can see here then under the proposed cost of service-based time of use rate design, we're talking about an average monthly bill of about $3,800 and a seasonal flat rate at $3,869. So again, we're starting to see that monthly bill difference increase relative to which option, or if you go with the option, or whether or not you go with the sort of the alternative to the optional rate. Looking at day 1, again, sort of with that peak in the middle of the day, and then lower usage in the off-peak periods. And then day 2, looking at sort of the inverse there, where it's higher in the greater periods and then lower in the off-peak periods. So you can see again now that the proposed cost service based time of use rate design under day 2, we're looking at about 4,091 versus 4,057 in the flat rate design. So how that's really going to impact you is going to depend entirely on what your profile looks like and how your operations are using energy throughout the day. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, that was with the 1.2 cent adder because it's, again, the credit is going away. Looking at sort of a smaller impact relative to that increase of 0.6 cents, a similar type of analysis here, right? Where again, we're looking at the same load profiles, we're looking at day 1, and we're looking at day 2. So it kind of just depends, again, how you use energy and how that's going to impact your bill. Next slide, please. All right. So now we're looking at a very large customer. So this is 48,000 megawatt hours annually. So that's 4,000 megawatt hours in a month. So this is a supermarket. This is a large retail customer. This customer is really using a lot of power. You can see on a daily basis right there, they're using 5.6 up to almost 6,000 or 6 megawatts of demand, right? So they're really putting a lot of demand on the system. They're using a lot of energy. You can see that the corresponding bill is significantly higher. Now we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, and this may represent sort of what some of you guys, what your customers, or what you as customers are seeing in your bill. But we're doing the similar type of analysis. We're looking at this load profile where you've got day 1 where the load is kind of coming up and then dropping off towards the end of the day. Day 1, it dropped off significantly. Day 2, it's pushed out a little further into the afternoon, evening, hour 19, 20, so 7, 8 p.m., and then dropping off. And so again, it's just going to be depending on how you use your power during the day is going to determine whether or not the proposed time of use rate design or the seasonal flat rate design is best for you. So we're looking here on day one at an average PG&E rate, 2022 rate of about $296,000. The 3CE current rates would be $295,000, slightly less. The proposed rates, either under the cost of service based time of use rate design or under the seasonal flat rate design, significantly less, right? Recognizing the cost-based, basically the cost of service-based rates design that we're proposing here. And so you can see that now the difference between the time of use rate design and the flat rate design is about $2,000, right? Depending on sort of, again, what load profile you may be on. This is with that PG&E rates that forecast increase at 1.2 cents or increase by 1.2 cents. If you go to the next slide, please. Now you can see here, we're just doing the same analysis of just adding in that point, basically half of the 1.2 cents or 6 cents. And so again, really just impacting that projected forecasted PG&E rate or the projected 3C current rate design. But of course, we're moving away from that rate design with these proposed changes. And so that's really what we're trying to show here, is that relationship between the forecasted PG&E rate and the proposed cost-based rates, either under the time of use rate design or under the seasonal flat rate design. Next slide, please. So some of the key benefits relative to some of the rate changes we're proposing. We are proposing an elimination of the generation demand charges. So this is all going to be energy related. We're offering a transitional seasonal flat rate. So again, looking at your load profile, understanding when you use power relative to on peak, off peak, super off peak, whatever the time period may be. The idea is that you will have that option of moving to a seasonal flat rate if that makes sense for you. As Lena mentioned early on, these rates are going to be fixed for a 3-year period. So we're trying to eliminate that rate uncertainty. Certainly there may be situations, underlying costs from the market that may substantially change that, but the intent is to have these rates fixed for 3 years. We're also providing access to 3C energy programs. That's one of the benefits of the 3CE and having the CCA program, or being part of that, is that you have access to those energy programs. And of course, 3CE folks would be more than happy to talk about those energy programs and how they may benefit you. So with that, I will turn it back over to Lena.
Thank you, Scott. In conclusion, I mean, it's really, I hope that this has given you an idea just of how rates are put together and what cost of service means for you as an energy customer. But the goal really is to make sure that for all of our customers that we're providing simplicity, competitiveness, predictability. I mean, we can't say enough, having rates that are in place for 3 years definitely does allow one to plan and prepare for energy costs. Fairness, meaning, of course, that we utilize the same data and information across all customer classes to determine how we were building out and structuring these new rates. And then, of course, having the options so that you can identify if the cost of service rate makes the most sense, or if you want the seasonal flat rate. In addition to that, we will actually have a rate calculator available after the rates have been approved. And it will be available on our site so that you can actually go there and do a comparison and determine which one of the options based on your usage patterns is actually going to make the most sense, so that you can make that selection. Of course, part of this design is also designed to, to help utilize rates to shift some of the behavior change. It's better for the system, it's better for the grid, and of course, climate goals. And I know some of that came up in conversations about load and solar and how each company or industry may be using power. And then, of course, as Scott mentioned, all customers continue to have benefit from access to energy programs. And if you have not had a chance to visit the program's webpage recently, definitely going to encourage you to do so, because we have more and more coming out every day. So before we jump into our question and answer, and I see a couple of questions popping up, I thought I would actually take a moment to stop sharing my screen and show you who will actually be answering the question. So we have several members of our leadership team here joining us today, including our CEO, Tom Habashi, our Chief Financial Officer, Tiffany Law, and then Robert Shaw, our Chief Operating Officer and General Counsel. So as you drop your questions in the Q&A, Rob will identify who it should go to, and then we'll see if we can get all of the questions answered here. And what's great is, of course, we will have the ability to, since we're answering these directly, other members who have joined, or community members who have joined on this call will have an opportunity to get those answers as well. So it may be one question for all. So Rob, you want to take it away?
Yeah, thanks, Lena. And Wendy, to address both of your questions, the first one might be contingent on where exactly you're located. As Lena mentioned at the start, we're serving all of those areas that she had highlighted, basically that are in PG&E service territory currently. If you are in Southern California Edison territory, we'll be expanding service into those areas beginning in October of this year. But then the cost of service effective date will change for Southern California Edison territories. The January 1, 2022 effective date is for the PG&E customers that we're currently serving. And then as to who 3CE is, we are a public agency. We are sourcing clean and renewable energy, so we're not a billing service. Your billing is still going to be handled by PG&E. We're out and actually procuring clean and renewable resources for your energy profile. We are your generation service provider. Mr. Lewis, your question here about, do the figures include demand charges? I think, Scott, that's probably best directed for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. So the intent is that under these proposed rates, we would actually be getting rid of the demand charges. So all that cost recovery would be in the energy charge. Now, it does not include the delivery charge, because delivery is still provided by PG&E. This is just related to the demand charges relative to power supply, because power supply has demand, delivery has demand. The delivery demand and all that stuff that PG&E is charging you is going to stay the same. We're proposing to change the generation side of things to be an energy-only rate. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Scott. So it looks like we haven't had any other questions drop in. We do have about 50 folks here joining us. I don't know if we only had the 3 questions. Feel free to drop in the Q&A.
Sorry, Lena, while we're waiting to see if anyone drops an additional question, and I just wanted to offer the clarification in terms of when that calculator would be available. As Lena mentioned, that will become available in June after the rates are approved, and you'll have a few months to be able to play with that calculator. But the option, the selection of whether or not you want to make an option to move to that flat seasonal rate option would be, I believe, end of September is what we're looking at. That gives us enough time that when those effective rates take place in January, we can have you set up. Looks like I've bought us enough time to answer a few more questions.
So let's see here.
So Valerie, you have a question, it looks like is specific to your system. And what I would suggest is that you reach out directly to Lena's team to address those particular questions. I think getting into specific systems or setups is difficult to answer for a broad area here. And then Eric, your question, looking at the actual usage and provide comparisons. Lena's actually working to develop that tool. So Lena, maybe you could address Eric's question.
Eric, so with the rate calculator, now there's going to be actually two options that exist. So for our small to medium business owners that may only have 1 or 2 or 3 meters, you can utilize the calculator, and technically a larger customer could as well. But it may be time prohibitive, being that you'd be entering each meter individually, or each account individually, and you may have dozens of accounts. So if you are a small to medium customer, then self-service with that tool will be perfect, whether you're residential, commercial, solar, not solar. But you can also call into the call center and get help there as well. And what they'll do is, if they see that you have a larger commercial account, then they will direct you to my team, so that we can actually pull all load for all sites and put together a report for you that just has everything in one place, that lets you know with a comparison what those benefits or those differences will be. So calculator, absolutely available. Call center, absolutely available, and they could do that over the phone. And then, like I said, if you're a larger commercial customer, the call center representative will escalate your request to my team, so that we can support all of your sites and give you a comprehensive analysis. I hope that answered your question, Eric. Oh, and then I see a follow-up to Eric's question about actual usage by day and hour. So yes, we would actually be pulling, if we're doing an analysis, if you call in to the call center and you want to do your analysis pulling interval data, that they can do that request that way. And like I said, if you're a larger customer, my team would take it. For our small to medium, then it'll actually utilize your recent billing information. So the kilowatt hours or kilowatt hour and usage that's there. So of course, since it will be built out to the time of use periods, it will have the ability to pull in that usage per time of day as well.
And we have a question about whether or not changing and moving to a generation-based rate and dropping demand charges might adversely impact large load customers. So customers running consistent 24/7 load. Scott, I don't know, we talked about the variability that within class structures we're going to build within rate classes, that 1% benefit across the rate class, and various customers might be impacted differently. Is there a tie directly to the demand charge and incorporating that into generation that might be a concern? And if so, how are we addressing that in our rate structure?
So I think there is a potential concern relative to load factor, customers' load factor, because as the comment there notes, that without demand charges and just energy charge, it is going to benefit low load factor customers. The question is how much would it benefit the high load factor or detriment the high load factor customers? And I think that's something that you're just going to have to sort of look at your bill and figure out relative to how those rates are, and probably more importantly, when you're using the power, because I think that's going to be a bigger driver than perhaps the load factor difference would be. Typically load factor, looking at just sort of a one demand read over the whole month, wherein we're splitting these different products into the different time of use buckets. So the answer is it kind of depends on what your usage looks like. There could be a detriment, and there could be a benefit. So that's just sort of the way that the new rate structure is going to have to be rolled out.
Let me see if I can help Scott a little bit. I think the fact that we are doing time of use should help take care of this issue. So if a customer have a low load factor, then they are likely to be using electricity during peak hours, and therefore they will pay for the demand some other way. Also keep in mind that the flat rate is only for 3 years, and for 3 years only, and beyond that it just goes away, and just help transition all the customers into that new time of use.
And I think there was another question there relative to the bill comparison. Just to follow up to that previous one, yes, the PG&E bill comparison does include demand charges from PG&E, so that is factored into that generation charge.
So it looks like there's one question left with regard to PG&E. I thought PG&E is responsible for demand charges, like delivery charges. Is that correct? So how will 3CE eliminate demand charges?
Yeah, so thank you, Lena. And yeah, Scott, go ahead. I think you addressed this a little bit earlier, but why don't you touch on that again?
Sure. So yes, PG&E has fixed costs. 3CE has fixed costs, right? They both have fixed costs relative to generation. Now, 3CE doesn't own any assets. They purchase power on the market, and they have long-term contracts and the like for renewable. But there are fixed costs that are incurred. 3CE has chosen to say we want to just recover that in the time of use based energy rate, as Tom was sort of mentioning, relative to the different time periods. PG&E does recover some of their fixed costs through the PCIA. That is one sort of mechanism that PG&E continues to recover some of their demand-related costs. It's recovered in an energy basis, but it is a fixed cost that is recovered in that energy basis. So yes, they still have some responsibility for some of those fixed costs, and as departed load, you still would have some of that responsibility via the PCIA charge. And again, sort of those adjustments to that, as we talked about through the ERRA process. So.
All right. So it looks like all of the open questions. Oh, there's one more.
Yeah, this is a follow-up from the same question. So it's asking or positing under the 3CE, it says fixed cost. I'm assuming the cost of service fixed cost option. Will there still be PG&E demand charges appearing on the bills? And again, the structure of the cost of service is really looking at the 3CE side of the bill. We cannot impact or change what PG&E would be charging on their side of the bill. There would still be PG&E delivery or demand charges for the PG&E delivered services. Scott, if I captured that correctly, or if you want to expand on it. Yeah.
No, I think that's right. I mean, when we talk about the fixed cost option, we're talking about an energy charge. We're just saying that rate is fixed over the season. It's either summer or winter. It doesn't change by time of use. So that's when we talk about fixed charges. It's really an energy rate. Granted, the nomenclature is a little confusing, right? Because we talk about demand charges and fixed charges and energy charges and time of use and things like that. But the 3CE seasonal rate is a energy rate that will remain constant. PG&E demand charges is sort of on their side, and if they're providing delivery, they may recover that in a demand charge under transmission or distribution, or however they sort of look at that. If you're being provided generation service by PG&E, then yes, but obviously then you wouldn't be a 3CE customer. So 3CE customers are getting provided generation by 3CE. That cost recovery is going to be through a variable basis, an energy dollars per kilowatt hour basis.
So there's a question about this particular customer's usage is 99% off peak. And the question is, how will their future bill look? That may be something specifically for the rate calculator that would help answer that question with certainty. I do want to note, just keep in mind that those peaks are going to be changing as the time of use periods change. But Scott, I think the rate calculator is really what's going to answer that question. But Scott, if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. The only thing I would say to that, if the majority of your usage is off peak, you're better off on the time of use default option, because the price is lower during those off peak periods than it would be if you were on sort of the seasonal flat rate that doesn't change. So again, that was sort of what we were trying to do with bill comparison analysis would sort of show what those differences were between the different usage periods on the right and sort of the bill calculation on the left. So.
Thank you, Scott. So it looks like our questions have slowed down. I just want to give one more minute to see if anyone has anything they'd like to throw into the questions. If not, then I know we're going to go ahead and close out this meeting. I would like to thank all of our panelists for jumping on and joining us this afternoon, and thank you, Scott, as well, for your detailed walkthrough. I hope this does shed some light on where we're headed and the values and benefits, of course, of what is going to be offered going forward. I see no other questions coming through. Did anyone want to say anything before we end our meeting here? Everybody's so quiet.
Lena, I'm sure you're going to do it, but I just want to extend my thanks to the participants.
Yes, thank you. We've had many community members jump on, and I want to thank you, and also thank you for answering your question. Asking your questions, because we know when you ask yours, there are several others that may be there. Oh, I saw one very last question from Craig Lewis. Is it okay if I answer that one? So, do the bills currently include a demand component? So there are some rate classes, primarily on our larger commercial industrial and our large ag, that do currently have a demand component, which is part of what in the comparisons that Scott was illustrating, some of that savings is due to the removal of those charges. And when you look at the comparison to our current rate and our future proposed rates, Craig. And I'm sure someone else might have had that same question as well. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. And as I mentioned, this recording will be posted on our website, so you feel free to share with anyone else in your industry that may have questions about where we're headed. Thank you.